place has such a wonderful atmosphere. What is it? What's wrong?
No time. We have to move now.
But where are we going?
Just follow me. We have to leave. Now.
I'm not going anywhere with you. What's happening?
No time. Trust me.
There are moments in business when a single decision quietly changes everything. Not a boardroom vote, not a billion-dollar presentation. Sometimes it's something far smaller. A seat, a misunderstanding, or the way someone treats a stranger. What happened that night at Table 3 started as a simple social mistake, and within 24 hours it erased $2.9 billion. This story is brought to you by the Mental Grand. The security guard had just tightened his grip on my arm when a voice came from behind us. Let her go. Now. The voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a blade. The guard froze instantly. Everyone at the table turned. A man was moving quickly through the VIP section. It was Daniel Mercer, Aurora Dynamics head of investor relations. Right behind him was Naomi Clark, the company's general counsel. Neither of them looked like people who had just seen a small misunderstanding at a party. They looked like people who had just realized something very serious was happening in front of cameras. Daniel's eyes immediately locked onto the guard's hand gripping my arm. "Take your hands off her," he said. The guard released me instantly, as if he had just touched something dangerous. Victoria Langford crossed her arms. "She's sitting at the wrong table," she said coldly. "We were just dealing with—" Daniel didn't let her finish. "No," he said calmly. "You're the one who doesn't understand what's happening." The entire table went silent. Monica Hayes looked from Daniel to me, the confident smile slowly fading from her face. Daniel turned slightly toward the people standing around us. Several phones were still raised. Cameras mounted on the ballroom ceiling were still recording everything. "Let me clarify something," Daniel said. Then he pointed toward me. "This is Emma Reeves." My name seemed to drop into the room like a heavy weight. Several people glanced down again at the place card sitting in front of me. Daniel continued, his voice calm but sharp enough to carry across the surrounding tables. "She is the final authorized representative from Crest Capital for the Aurora Dynamics transaction." The room went completely still. Someone at the next table slowly lowered their phone. Daniel stepped closer to Victoria. "In simpler terms," he said, "she's the person responsible for approving the capital release." He paused for a moment, letting the sentence settle into the silence. Then he added the words that changed the atmosphere of the entire room. "If she says no, the $2.9 billion capital commitment being announced tonight doesn't exist." The reaction was immediate. Victoria blinked. Monica instinctively stepped half a step backward. Across the room, someone whispered, "Wait, what?" Another voice murmured quietly, "Did he say Crest?" The orchestra was still playing somewhere in the ballroom, but around Table 3 it might as well have stopped. I calmly adjusted the sleeve of my jacket and looked directly at Victoria. My voice stayed completely steady. "I told you." I tilted my head slightly. "You're making a very big mistake." No one laughed this time. Not Victoria, not Monica, not the people holding phones, and for the first time since the confrontation began, the entire room understood something. The woman they had just tried to drag away from Table 3 was the one person standing between Aurora Dynamics and $2.9 billion. The music in the ballroom continued playing, but no one around the VIP section was listening anymore. The air around Table 3 had completely frozen. And then another voice came from the back of the room. "What's going on here?" People turned immediately. Adrian Langford, CEO of Aurora Dynamics, had just stepped into the VIP section. He walked in with the posture of a man preparing to greet investors and deliver the opening speech of the evening's gala. But it took him only a few seconds to realize something had gone very wrong. He saw his wife standing beside the VIP table, her expression tight. Monica Hayes, unusually silent. Two security guards slowly backing away from me. Daniel Mercer and Naomi Clark standing nearby with the expressions of people who had just realized a problem had become very expensive, and around them dozens of phones were still recording. Adrian stopped mid-step. "Can someone explain what's happening here?" No one answered immediately. The silence lasted long enough for every camera to capture it. Finally, Daniel Mercer spoke. His voice remained calm, but carried clearly across the nearby tables and the live stream microphones. "Your wife," he said, "just had security drag the person responsible for High & Crest's capital authorization out of her seat." The entire room seemed to stop breathing. Adrian slowly turned his head toward me, then back to Daniel. The calculation in his eyes happened quickly, faster than anyone else in the room. This wasn't a social embarrassment. This was transactional risk. And worse, it had just happened on camera. Victoria crossed her arms again, still irritated. "I thought she was just an employee," she said. "She said she was sitting in the wrong seat." "Victoria." Adrian cut her off. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to make her stop immediately. He didn't look at her again. Instead, he turned toward me. For the first time since entering the room, he actually studied my face carefully. "Miss Reeves," he said slowly, "I believe there has been a misunderstanding here." I didn't respond. Adrian took a careful breath. He was already shifting into diplomatic mode, the mode CEOs use when billions of dollars suddenly become uncertain. "Perhaps we should step aside," he said carefully, "and discuss this privately." Monica quickly jumped in, forcing a smile that looked painfully artificial. "Yes, exactly," she said. "This is just a small misunderstanding." Naomi Clark stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, but the words landed like a warning. "This was recorded." Adrian froze. His eyes slowly moved across the cameras mounted on the ceiling, then across the phones still filming from every direction. A live stream, an archived broadcast, a room full of witnesses. I calmly adjusted my sleeve. "I know," I said. Adrian looked at me again, this time longer, long enough to understand something his wife still hadn't realized. What had happened here wasn't simply bad behavior at a gala. It was documented conduct, the kind lawyers write clauses about, the kind investors remember, the kind of moment that can quietly destroy a $2.9 billion deal before the night is even over. A few minutes later, Daniel Mercer suggested moving the conversation to the hotel's executive lounge. It was a small meeting room located down a quiet hallway away from the gala. The door closed behind us, and the music from the ballroom disappeared instantly. Inside the room, 4 people sat across from me: Adrian Langford, Daniel Mercer, Naomi Clark, and Paul Chen, the company's CFO. Victoria and Monica were not invited inside. The door closing behind them felt like a clear line between social theater and corporate governance. For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence felt heavier than the noise outside. Finally, Adrian broke it. "Ms. Reeves," he said carefully, "it was a misunderstanding." Even he seemed to realize the word sounded wrong. Misunderstanding was far too small for something that had already become evidence. Naomi didn't look at him. Neither did I. "Misunderstandings," I said calmly, "don't usually involve security." Adrian looked down at the table. "My wife believed you were—" He stopped, because whatever word he had been about to say would have sounded worse if he spoke it out loud. Instead of helping him finish the sentence, I asked a different question. "Was tonight's gala being live-streamed to investors?" The room fell silent again. Naomi Clark answered first. "Yes." She opened the folder in front of her. "The event's internal cameras are recording, and part of the broadcast is also being streamed to our investor audience." She looked back at me. "All footage is archived." I nodded slightly. Then I mentioned something that seemed at that moment to be remembered clearly only by me. In the investment agreement between Aurora Dynamics and High & Crest Capital, there is a clause called the Conduct Integrity Provision. Paul Chen frowned. He remembered the clause, but clearly he had never expected it to matter. I continued calmly. "That clause states that any conduct by senior leadership or affiliated representatives that materially damages the reputation of the transaction during negotiations may trigger the fund's right to immediately withdraw capital." No one moved. Paul slowly reached for the printed agreement on the table. His finger stopped halfway down the page. Section 14, he said quietly. Naomi leaned closer. Her expression changed as she reread the language. It doesn't require intent, she said. Only documented conduct. Adrian's eyes moved between them. Are you saying... Naomi answered before he finished. I'm saying the event that just happened downstairs qualifies as documentation. The room became even quieter. Adrian slowly leaned back in his chair. His mind was already racing through the consequences. His wife, a major shareholder, security acting under her instruction, a public confrontation, and dozens of cameras recording every second. What had happened at table 3 was no longer arrogance, it was evidence. And that night the deal didn't officially collapse yet, but it was standing right on the edge of a cliff. The next morning, Aurora Dynamics woke up to a completely different reality. The first notification arrived in Paul Chen's inbox, an email from Crest Capital, short, formal, and irreversible. Crest withdraws its capital commitment. Paul read the line once, then again, then a third time. The primary tranche of the deal, $2.9 billion, had just disappeared from Aurora Dynamics. Financial structure. Within minutes, phones across the company began ringing. Board members, banks, legal advisors, investors, all asking the same question: what happened? Inside the conference room, Adrian Langford stood at the head of the table, staring at his laptop screen. He had known this was possible, but knowing something could happen and watching it actually happen were two very different experiences. The deal wasn't delayed. It wasn't renegotiated. It was gone. I didn't celebrate. There was no victory, only consequences. Terms written into contracts, actions recorded on camera, and a system doing exactly what it had been designed to do. A few days later, the story began circulating quietly through investment circles, not as gossip, but as a lesson. Because in business, power doesn't always walk into a room with a title or a spotlight. Sometimes it sits quietly at the end of the table and waits to see how people behave. Respect in business isn't just a courtesy, it's the price of admission. And the seat at table 3 that night was just a chair, but the way they treated the person sitting in it cost them $2.9 billion. This story was shared with you by the Mental Grand. If you enjoy powerful business stories like this, stories about decisions, consequences, and the moments that change everything, then make sure you subscribe to the Mental Grand. And if you like stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because sometimes the biggest business lessons don't come from numbers. They come from how people treat each other when they think no one important is watching.